Hey, welcome back, everyone. Well, some interesting stuff. Trump is suggesting right now the silent majority is back. And personally, I think I've seen the writing on the wall, and I'm cautiously believing this as well. But I'll let you decide on this. I'm going to show you some clips of this. I also want to go into some other things, including the the detrimental decision PayPal recently made. You might have seen the news that PayPal told people they were going to fine them $2,500 if you or I were to, for example, post what they claim is misinformation on the internet. Really, this is working almost like what we'd imagine with the centralized digital banking currency, a CBDC, being essentially attempted, at least initially announced through PayPal, is something they would be doing. This started a very fast revolt, and frankly, the very quick turnaround of this, where PayPal immediately revoked this and began even apologizing to people, I think shows something interesting. It shows really an underlying trend that I want to discuss. Also, as well with Twitter, Elon Musk looks like he's going to go through and buy Twitter, and there is a meltdown that is really kind of funny to watch, just being blunt, where journalists of all people are concerned that if free speech returns, that it's going to impact the midterm elections. I'm not even joking. God forbid the American voter can discuss their viewpoints, right? It's going to be a very interesting episode, folks. I want to show you kind of a lot of connecting pieces with all of this, the way that Trump is framing this, and the way we see the grassroots reacting, of course, separate from his statements. But I think all of this shows a real trend going into the November elections very soon, coming up very soon. I think the writing is on the wall that something is happening, a big shift is happening, and I want to show you the evidence of that. So stick around, folks. It's going to be a great episode today. That said, real quick, folks, again, we're both on YouTube and Rumble and also Epic TV as well. We will jump over exclusive at Epic TV after about 30-ish minutes or so. So if you don't have a subscription yet, come and join us. We do an hour-and-a-half show. And very often, great discussions. It's good stuff and really great audience there. So come join us. Again, that's epochtv.com. Also, check out as well some of the documentaries we've been doing. The latest one, a special feature, my feature on the border crisis. Also, don't forget, don't miss that. All right, that said, let me jump into the first part of this because I want to show you where the discussion is kind of happening. This is RSBN, Right Side Broadcasting Network. It says, Trump says the silent majority is back, and he's right. Now, the he's right part, that's of course an opinion from RSBN, but they do show some of the data really supporting that. And let me show you. It says President Donald Trump commented on Truth Social on Sunday, declaring the silent majority is back. Historically, the so-called silent majority in the United States are those Americans who do not typically participate in civic discourse or politics, but who nevertheless tend to vote conservative. During a Save America rally in Warren, Michigan on Saturday night, Trump boldly predicted the comeback of the silent majority in the 2022 midterms, and Trump said, quote, "It was hardworking patriots like you who built this country, and it's hardworking patriots like you who are going to save our country." Then he said, "The silent majority is back and stronger than ever before." Now, Breitbart noted as well, a new survey from ITIPP found that President Donald Trump would easily dominate a hypothetical presidential matchup against Joe Biden. Some say he did previously as well, with those surveyed indicating that only around 1/3 of registered Democrats would vote for Biden, again suggesting that even Democrats don't want to vote for Biden and suggesting they need to find somebody else. One of the ideas being floated, for example, is Gavin Newsom, who also nearly lost an election in California against Larry Elder. I don't know we'll see if Gavin Newsom could run on the idea of Californifying America. But anyways, they're facing this kind of predicament now that it seems even Democrats don't want to vote for Biden. The conservatives seem to be kind of growing in numbers. The grassroots is swinging that way. And at the same time, too, even a lot of the traditional voting base of the Democrats is moving conservative, including, for example, Latin Americans, who are in very large numbers now, suggesting they will vote for Donald Trump, even more so than they would say they would vote for Joe Biden. There's a real grassroots shift taking place right now that is showing up in some of the polls, with even some of the top, Democrat advisors, political advisors, warning that they're going to lose pretty hard if they don't change something drastically. It seems that the Democrat approach to this, oftentimes working on scandal and so on, is to go on this whole idea of extremism. But the narrative of extremism seemed to have backfired on them. It wasn't working. And now we're seeing a lot of different shifts taking place as well, suggesting that they're terrified that the big tech might stop censoring people, that they're terrified that discourse might come back. And it's interesting to see, actually, that they're worried that if their stranglehold on communications and stranglehold on information is lost, that they will face basically a tsunami of voters who suddenly wake up. It does appear that the silent majority does not want to be silent anymore, is what the data is suggesting. The silent majority no longer wants to be silent. The silent majority is being silenced. And aside from even the possibility of them getting their voices back, which I'll show you in a bit, where I'm going to go pretty in-depth into that today, it seems that even if they remain silent, there is concern, at least among the Democrats, and conservatives are predicting now as well, that they're going to lose very hard come November unless something happens. We'll see. Now, it says, conversely, the same poll found that Trump's base would strongly show up for him to vote, even though, remember, Democrats are saying that they would not vote for Biden, right? Only around 1/3 of registered Democrats would actually vote for him, meaning 2/3 would not. Whereas the majority of Trump voters would vote for, or Republicans would vote for Trump, and it said that he garnered a whopping 54% of the vote, compared to Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis at 15%. And remember, Ron DeSantis is kind of number 2 next to Trump in terms of the guy who I think a lot of Republicans would like to see run, and Trump is dominating the polls even over him. So we'll see where that goes. Now, let me show you a video real quick, or let me actually show you, this is just a tweet. Let me show you what Trump is saying on Truth Social. This is October 2nd, real Donald Trump on Truth Social. Trump said very simply, "The silent majority is back." Now, is the silent majority back? What's that actually based on? I'm going to go that into a minute. First, though, folks, we do have a sponsor today, and today's episode is brought to you by Secure. Over 155 million Americans were affected by data leaks in 2020. The average American had their personal data stolen about 4 times over the year. People get anxious because they can't protect their online data and activity. But now there's a new email and messenger app called Secure. That's Secur. They can give privacy and security for sending emails and messages. Secure's server and data center are hosted in Switzerland, which has the strictest data privacy laws in the world. Secure does not rely on big tech companies like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, which also means it's not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act. Secure does not ask for your phone number, mine your data, or upload your contacts. It functions by adding people you know, then adding their secure numbers. And you can also still chat with non-secure users by sending them an invite. Now, folks, it's only $5 for the messenger, $7 for the email, or $10 for the email and messenger package. You can visit secure.com today for a free 7-day trial, or use the promo code Joshua to get 25% off. And big thanks out to Secure for sponsoring today's episode. Now, let's go deeper into this. What is the silent majority? Why does the idea of the silent majority matter? And is it really significant that Trump is saying the silent majority is back? Well, you could take it for what it's worth, right? Previously, Trump has declared that the silent majority is back. He said that, for example, the silent majority was credited basically in his 2016 victory. Really, I think even pollsters, not just the Democrats, but the establishment in general, I think didn't think Trump was going to win. You had different, legacy news outlets claiming Trump, by some different estimates, had like a 2% chance of victory over Hillary Clinton. And so the silent majority was what just swung the whole country in favor of Trump in 2016. The silent majority, those quiet voters who, if you ask them, who they're voting for, they might be like, I think I like to think for myself, because they don't want to say who they're going to vote for. Those are the folks who voted for Trump. In fact, it was a funny discussion. I remember back in 2016, if you ask people, if you had a conversation with somebody and you were like, "Hey, who are you thinking about voting for?" If they were going to vote for Hillary Clinton, they'd be like, "Hillary Clinton." If they were going to vote for Trump, they'd be like, "Oh, I like to consider a lot of different people. I like to, think about. I'm not really Republican or Democrat." Those were the ones voting for Trump, but they didn't want to say it. They didn't want to say it because it's of course controversial to come out and say you're going to vote for Trump these days, because people tend to attack people for that, and so Trump's voting base tends to be relatively silent. Now, I'd say that changed quite a bit when Trump was president. Arguably, because I think some people chose to remain silent because they didn't want to anger their family members or anger their friends. Many people who did want to vote for Trump did not voice that they wanted to vote for Trump. And I think you're in a similar situation now as well, where being a MAGA Republican, i.e. a Trump supporter, is basically branded as a type of extremism. Now, will people still voice their support for Trump if doing so means they're going to be labeled extremists or even terrorists, the way that Biden's making it sound, or insurrectionists, and so on? I do think that really Trump's voting base tends to be silent. Now, of course, that was also cited as being essential for Trump's potential victory in 2020. An election that many of us believe Trump won by a landslide, but that's, of course, for you to decide. Politico in 2020 noted this, though. They said President Trump, they didn't say he's president, but they said Trump bets his presidency on silent majority. That in the 2020 elections, they're saying that Trump was basically putting all of his cards in the deck, suggesting that the silent majority was going to be what swung it. And that was not in any way like the belief that the silent majority was in no way a controversial idea technically, because many voters noted the basically bad data in polling in 2016. Because of that, a lot of people, even when seeing the polls in 2020, predicting that Trump was going to lose or whatever else, a lot of people just didn't believe it because, well, in 2016 they said the same thing. Now, Politico said this. They said the lines of demarcation between the nation's cities and their suburbs have faded in the decades since Richard M. Nixon courted the silent majority that elected him to the White House. With his law and order tough on protesters rhetoric, Donald Trump is betting his presidency it still exists. After January 6th, do we also call Biden a tough on protesters president? I don't know. Now it says the suburbs, not the red, but sparsely populated rural areas, the country most often associated with Trump, and where Trump found the majority of his support in 2016. Yet it was in the suburbs that Democrats built their House majority 2 years ago in a dramatic midterm repudiation of the Republican president. Now, of course, there are people trying to, is there a silent majority? I'd say absolutely. I think most Trump supporters, whether intentionally or not, are relatively silent. And one of the reasons I say maybe they're not intentionally silent is because many of them are being silenced. Now, that being said, there's some phenomena taking place, and I think the significance of this phenomena is not being properly understood. You have right now different social media platforms, financial platforms, even businesses trying to go along with this extremist label, and also pushing forward even further with this idea of misinformation and disinformation being a threat to democracy. If we were a democracy, that might actually be a threat, but we're not. We're a constitutional republic. Trying to frame the idea that basically open discourse is a threat, that free speech is a threat. And they're framing it as a threat specifically because they said it can impact the 2022 midterms and probably 2024 election. To me, this has greater significance. To me, this is significant because it's suggesting that the silent majority is not intentionally silent, that people are sick of it, they want to speak out, they want to be heard, and they are being silenced. And having been silenced, frankly, they're protesting in different ways. And they're powerful enough where some of these platforms are backpedaling on their stances. Understand the significance of this, and I'll show you in a bit. Understand the significance of this, that the platforms that are trying to silence people, the platforms that are putting policies in place to go after people if they post what they claim is misinformation or whatever else they want to frame it as, oftentimes something that is viewed as political censorship, the pushback is strong enough of the grassroots, of the, let's call it not the silent majority, but the silenced majority. The pushback is strong enough that even these big businesses cannot withstand it. Even the big businesses are folding to the pressure. And let me show you one of the recent examples on this. PayPal, which many of you might know is a digital transaction platform. If you, for example, buy a product online, sometimes it has a pay with PayPal option because a lot of people don't want to put their credit card number in some random website on the internet. Because you never know if it's secure or not. And so PayPal tends to mediate transactions online. PayPal tried to implement a very strange policy where PayPal said they were going to start giving people fines. PayPal wanted to fine you like a parking ticket if you posted what they claim is misinformation. Now that raises some serious questions. First, on how can PayPal fine people? How can they give you fines as a private company? Second of all, in other words, is it even legal? Second of all, how do who's determining whether this is misinformation? Who's determining what's true and what's false? And third, I guess, who's pulling the strings behind it? People immediately were not having it. People were outraged. People lashed out at PayPal, and PayPal immediately, almost not too long after this news came out, backpedaled and tried pretending the whole thing was an error. Let me show you how this went down. Now, Epoch Times had this story. It said, PayPal reverses course, says company will not seize money from people promoting misinformation. Now, as I explain this, remember the big picture. Remember the context, because I'm going to, beyond PayPal, this goes into other platforms as well. All of this is related, I think, and all of this shows an underlying social phenomena. The underlying social phenomena is the important thing to watch. The underlying social phenomena is what's really significant here. But let me lay this out and keep that underlying social phenomena in mind as we go through this. Now, Epoch Times again said that PayPal reverses course. They're not going to start fining people, they claim, at least not yet. But this is what happened. It says PayPal on October 8th said it was not implementing a new policy that would have enabled the company to seize money from users who allegedly promote misinformation or hate. How do you define hate? Well, if you read the definition of racism these days, it's no longer discrimination based on your skin color or race. Racism is now defined as social and economic systems that lead to unequal outcomes, i.e. anything that's not socialism. Suggesting that the definition they're using, even for hate in this case, could just be something going after capitalism or something going after any kind of freedom-minded or traditionally minded person. Maybe you could be given fines, $2,500 by this random business if they believe that you've said something they don't agree with. That is the big concern with this. Not to mention the idea of misinformation. And frankly, we saw how the misinformation label went, where the COVID-19 virus coming from the Wuhan laboratory was misinformation, something that is arguable now. The vaccine not being safe and effective was misinformation, something which is not only arguable now, but I think very, frankly, based in fact. And later on in the week, I'm going to show you some stuff, including, for example, the Florida Attorney General noting that men have about an 85% increase in risk of fatal heart issues if they get vaccinated with the mRNA vaccines. The things they lay, and on Wednesday we'll go over that. Actually, I have a few big. There's so much big stuff going on, I can't fit into one episode. So I'll be going over some stuff going through different days. There's so much stuff going on right now that I can't cover it in a single episode. But I want to lay out again, show you trends and trajectories. In other words, folks, misinformation is not really misinformation, at least not the way they've been framing it. And platforms and scientists and government officials trying to act as the gatekeepers of information are really just acting like the thought police. Thought police who themselves oftentimes promote disinformation and misinformation while suppressing legitimate truth. Now, people, of course, I think are waking up to this. People are starting to understand it. And there was an immediate, very strong pushback against PayPal from that group of people, I think, who do understand this and understand the implications of a private business trying to censor people and even fine people, giving you like a ticket for saying something that they claim is false. Now, it says an AUP notice recently went out in error. This is PayPal rolling it back. PayPal saying, hey, that's not true. It's misinformation that we were going to do that because we accidentally sent it out. That's basically what they said. They said an AUP notice recently went out in error that included incorrect information. It was misinformation that they wanted to fine you for misinformation, they're claiming, because they sent out that thing in error, the thing that they actually wrote and actually did send out. They're claiming that was an error, folks. They say PayPal is not fining people for misinformation, and this language was never intended to be inserted into our policy. They just put it in their policy and sent it out. How dare you suggest that the thing they wrote and then sent to everybody was real? How dare we assume that, right? That's PayPal telling us that in an email. And PayPal said our teams are working to correct our policy pages. Why would they need to correct the policy page if it was an error and everybody, it's just, it's false information that it's there? Yeah, it's false, but it's there, and they have to correct it, right? That's what they're saying. The company is working to correct their policy page. They said, we're sorry for the confusion this has caused. Now, this is of course just corporate crisis management as far as I'm concerned. This is just classic corporate crisis management, saying, "Oh, we didn't mean to offend everybody. Please don't take your money out of our platform." That's what you're watching right now. Now, the company in September announced that it was amending its acceptable use policy. That's what AUP stands for. The policy due to take effect in November, just ahead of the midterm, right in time for the midterm elections, funny enough, said that users may not use PayPal for the sending, posting, or publication of any messages, content, or materials in PayPal's sole discretion that are A, harmful, obscene, harassing, or objectionable, that B, depict or appear to depict nudity, sexual, or other intimate activities. C, depict or promote illegal drug use. D, depict or promote violence, criminal activity, cruelty, or self-harm. E, depict, promote, or incite hatred or discrimination. So you can't depict, promote, or incite hatred or discrimination or of protected groups. That's what they say, of protected groups. So presumably, I don't think white people are a protected group. So you can actually probably depict, promote, and incite hatred and discrimination against white people, because this is specifically against protected groups or of individuals. It says, or of individuals or groups based on protected characteristics. Presumably, that they say that's race, religion, gender or identity, sexual orientation. I assume when they say protected, they're not protected. That probably means if you're straight, you're not protected. If you're a Christian, you're probably not protected. It's probably okay to discriminate and incite hatred against them based on some of what we're seeing right now. They don't fully clarify this, but we've seen on other social media platforms that certain types of hatred are okay. Certain types of discrimination seem to be allowed, but others are not. And so when they make the very clear distinction that this is not about hatred or discrimination overall, it's specifically against what they deem as protected groups. In other words, they allow hate, they allow discrimination under groups they don't deem protected. In other words, which actually itself, ironically, would constitute discrimination. Unequal application of a policy would constitute discrimination. If they're deeming that a certain group does not fall under the protected label, and that based on their religion, race, sexual orientation, identity, whatever else, that they're not included under that. That means that it's a discriminating policy. It's so ironic that they do this, but they don't stop there. They also say that any information that presents a risk to user safety or well-being or are fraudulent, promote misinformation, or are unlawful. So again, who's deciding what is misinformation? Or that infringe the property rights, intellectual property, or whatever, are otherwise unfit for publication, etc. There's some normal stuff in there as well. Now, if you were to violate any of those, they're claiming, PayPal says users are subject to repercussions. Those include, quote, liquidated damages of $2,500 per violation. The money will be taken directly from a person's PayPal account. So, folks, if you have a PayPal account, be careful what you post online, because PayPal is saying that everything you post that they deem discriminatory or hateful or against a certain, maybe sexual orientation or whatever else, or if they deem it's misinformation, they claim they have the right to give you a $2,500 fine for every violation. Keep in mind how broad this is being applied. If you question gender orientation, if you don't believe that children should be chemically castrated, for example, that is a $2,500 fine, at least the way they could justify it. If you were to post a meme, for example, claiming that the vaccines are not, in fact, safe and effective, or that face masks are not completely safe, and they claim that because a lot of these are globalist companies, they're international companies, that in Europe, for example, that might actually violate the law, or in Australia, for example, that might violate the law, that they might reserve the right to give you a $2,500 fine, hypothetically speaking, because that's the way these terms are currently being applied. In other words, if you want to understand the nature of this law, you only have to look. Well, it's not a law. This is literally a business trying to act like a government. And it's probably not legal for them to do this anyways. But if you want to understand what that means, all you have to do is look at how these terms are currently being used. Look at how misinformation, the phrase, is being used. Look at how discrimination is being used. Again, the words don't mean what they say they mean. The words don't mean what we have traditionally been taught and know they mean. These are words that have been politicized. This is actually a very common communist tactic. Mao Zedong would call these power words. It's where you take a word and you alter it. You alter its meaning and give it what they would call revolutionary potential. You imbue it with a revolutionary implication. For example, under Mao Zedong, the word superstition was co-opted, and superstition was then used as a weapon to attack religions. All religions were deemed superstitious, and anybody promoting superstition could be attacked. For example, any kind of what they called them black classes, which would be, for example, rightists, or what we would call conservatives, could be killed in China under the Cultural Revolution. They would take terms, change their meanings, and then after changing their meanings, use them as political labels that they would use to enforce either sometimes just very, very serious laws, if not laws they would use to kill you in other communist countries. We're seeing that to some extent in the U.S. I don't know if they're going to kill people just yet, but without a doubt, they want to fine you. They want to deplatform you. They want to take your voice away. They want to go after you in various ways, maybe get you fired from your job. They want to cancel you from polite society, although I would argue that polite society these days is not quite as polite as some of us would like. Now, deeper into this, PayPal is basically suggesting that the misinformation thing that this rule they wanted to implement was not officially there, that they only drafted it and then published it and then sent it out. In my opinion, it looks like a crisis management thing. They released it officially. They did, in fact, release it. They panicked because of the very, very rapid and very loud pushback. Again, the silent majority no longer wants to be silenced. And interestingly, the silent majority in this case very quickly lashed out at PayPal and made PayPal unsilence them. And interestingly as well, when people gave PayPal the benefit of the doubt. They said, fine, fine PayPal, I'm still canceling my account. But I'll take your word for it. Let me go and verify whether in fact you have published this. And then people went to the acceptable use policy on PayPal, and they found something very concerning, which is that PayPal already implemented things like this. They don't have the misinformation thing, but they still have a bunch of other stuff. And let me show you their actual terms of service, their actual use policy. Let me show you this, folks. This is the current acceptable use policy, last updated September 20th, 2021. It does not contain the misinformation thing. I searched for it. They've already scrubbed that from the books of history. So apparently they've rewritten history on this one. They've taken that Stalin photo and just deleted that guy off the photo, right? But it says this still, right? They still say violation of this acceptable use policy constitutes a violation of the PayPal user agreement and may subject you to damages, including liquidated damages of $2,500 per violation, which may be debited directly from your PayPal account as outlined in the user agreement. In other words, they still will fine you. If you have PayPal right now in their current acceptable use policy, if you have PayPal, they say that they will fine you if you violate their rules. Now, they've removed this idea that they're going to fine you for misinformation. They've taken that out. But let me show you some of the other stuff they still have in there. This is when people tried to give PayPal the benefit of the doubt and went to their thing, they found that everything of concern was still there, other than them wanting to give you a fine for publishing what they claim is misinformation. And it says prohibited activities. It says you may not use the PayPal service for activities that violate any law, statute, ordinance, or regulation, which, of course, if you're in Australia or Europe, for example, or maybe even parts of California, could actually include misinformation still. Could actually include, for example, posting illegal memes. If you're in China, I don't know if they allow PayPal in China, but could include posting religious content. In other words, in some countries where misinformation or medical misinformation is deemed a crime or even an ordinance, but they're not just saying violate a law, they say statute, ordinance, or regulation as well. If you violate even a regulation from, Biden administration, something like that, even if it's not a written law, they will fine you $2,500, or at least say they can. And they will debit it to your account, meaning that it does not, in the way I'm interpreting this, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have money in your account for them to fine you. You don't, in the way I'm reading this at least, even if you have an account with $0 on it, they can debit you the charge, is what seems to be the case based on their current policy. And folks, that web page I'm showing you right now, that is the current live page from PayPal. It's not only that, but they said they'll also give you a $2,500 fine for the promotion of hate, violence, racial, or other forms of intolerance that is discriminatory or the financial exploitation of a crime. Interestingly, they've removed this whole protected group label, which I find very interesting. Maybe somebody informed them that, if you're saying that this only applies to certain groups of people, that in and of itself is discriminatory. They're now saying that if you post anything that promotes hate, and that's a very broad term these days, violence, which is typically kind of a politically divisive term because typically Antifa and BLM have no laws prohibiting them from doing that. And Democrats post death threats all the time. But if you're a conservative and you even suggest it, you might have the FBI knock on your door. Or they say if you do a promotion of racial or other form of intolerance, any kind of intolerance they're suggesting. Maybe, for example, and again, intolerance is very broadly defined these days. Basically, having any kind of moral belief these days could be deemed intolerance, which is the downward spiral, I think, of the absolute liberalist idea. And let me explain that. The trajectory of absolute liberalism, even though I generally agree with classical liberalism, I think Frederick Bastiat and others were fantastic personally. But the idea of absolute liberalism, when taken to an extreme, means that any kind of belief of morality can be deemed discriminatory. Because as long as you believe in a right and wrong and a good and evil, if you believe that one thing is good and another thing is bad, it means that you believe a person who might commit a bad deed is doing something bad. And if you believe that something is bad, that means in this case that you are having some kind of discriminatory or intolerant belief. At this rate, any kind of sexual morality can be deemed discriminatory. Any kind of belief in terms of traditional morality could be deemed discriminatory when taken to its extreme. And currently you do see this as a trend. I've mentioned previously that one of the main bases of communist thought would be naturism. The idea, under the naturist idea, the idea that anything that emerges from human action, anything that emerges from human nature is moral. It was, kind of an atheistic, actually Satanistic, idea in its time, around the time of the French Revolution, roughly. This naturist idea was the belief, again, that anything that emerges from human nature is righteous. And so anything, then if that's true, then what do you define as evil? It's anything that restricts human nature. In other words, morality and religion were deemed evil because they restricted human nature and any whim you might have in the moment. Morality that restricts and puts, the shackles onto your whims in the moment. These types of things were what were considered evil. When taken to an extreme, and as we've seen under communism, it has been taken to an extreme, I think, by definition of it, right? We're at basically the level now where this is being applied without any of the previous historical context or deeper thought processes or beliefs. It's become part of the social culture. And if you understand what that means in terms of enforcement policy, where a company claims they'll even give you a fine, and I don't think everyone can afford $2,500 on a regular basis, give you a fine debited to your account if you have an account with them. It's pretty dang serious. Also, they're saying that if you purchase ammunition, firearms, or certain firearms parts or accessories, that they will also fine you $2,500. Hear that, folks? If you have PayPal and you use PayPal to purchase a firearm, purchase ammunition, or purchase parts or accessories for a firearm, they're claiming that they will give you a $2,500 fine. Now, there's a lot more on this because I'm going to show you the deeper context of this. As I mentioned, as we go through this, understand this is a phenomenon. Understand this is a social grassroots phenomenon that's moving. And understand this in context of the idea whether we have a silent majority that is in fact waking up. The silent majority was strong enough to get PayPal to back off the worst of those policies. They still have some in place, but they did get them to back off the worst of those policies. That being said, now you have signs of panic among the Democrats. They've begun starting up really false front operations masquerading as local news outlets that are posting Democrat propaganda. I'm not joking. Ironically, what they accuse a lot of other people of doing. If this were a conservative program, they'd call this a dark money misinformation operation. But they basically started up 51 fake news websites across the United States in local communities. And they're doing it while trying to masquerade as local news outlets. They're doing that You also have a huge shift taking place on Twitter, and there's panic like you wouldn't believe. Well, maybe like you would believe. The screeching at the clouds taking place among news outlets as free speech may soon return to Twitter is, I think, just across the board and frankly kind of funny to watch. And so let me show you I'm going to show you what they're saying. I'm going to show you the picture of what's growing and moving right now. That said, though, folks, for the next part, I'm going to jump over exclusively to Epic TV. And so I'm going to show you all of this. First, let's jump over to Epic TV. Before we jump over, folks, I'm going to show you a trailer for an interview I did that if I did have PayPal, could probably get me fined for $2,500. Maybe they will. I don't check my PayPal. I think I deleted it a while back. But let me show you this trailer that probably would get me fined $2,500 by PayPal. This is Gender Ideology is a Cultural Wrecking Ball Meant to Destroy Family and Tradition. This is my interview with Jay Richards. Let me show you this trailer, then we'll jump over exclusively to Epic TV.
Think of gender ideology as a cultural wrecking ball for destroying the fundamental cell of society, which is the family. It's a sort of utopian cultural wrecking ball that's less interested in what comes after than in destroying the present order. And as leftists have known for a century and a half, the family, the church, these institutions outside the state, they're the main bulwark against a totalizing state, so they have to be destroyed.
How does that destroy the family?
We want our categories to sort of fit at the joints of reality. And so if you can take a child at an age before he or she has actually formed those categories and dissolve it and say, well, some people are boys, some people are girls, some people are both, neither, or somewhere in between, which is a direct quote from a children's book.
Yeah, folks, again, don't miss that interview. It's on Epic TV. That says jump over exclusively to Epic TV. I'll see you there. All right, folks. Thank you for being here. Those of you curious, I got my ginseng tea again today. Actually, I went and bought a